call long distance to talk to your relatives in different states. California, Washington, and Texas have the largest, these are the three largest states with Pacific Islanders and Chamorros. Hawaii is the largest, but is not the largest populated by Chamorros. And California, by far, has the largest percentage of Chamorros in the states. Now, the data limitations are ongoing. We've been talking about these data limitations for quite some time. One limitation with data, and this was in part alleviated with U.S. Census 2000, is the aggregation of Pacific Islanders under Asian American, or more recently Asian Pacific American. So with 2000 census, there was the creation of Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, which is what the previous data reflects. But there's another, given my interest in looking at educational diaspora, I kind of did an internet analysis of data system-wide in the CSU, the Cal State University system, and the University of California system. In obviously the two largest systems of higher education in the state with the largest proportion of Pacific Islanders next to Hawaii, and the state with the largest proportion of Chamorros. And so in looking at the system-wide data, there continues to be an aggregation, meaning a lumping together of Pacific Islanders with Asian Americans, including Southeast Asians, including Filipinos, all under that one umbrella term. On particular campuses where it stands to reason where you have larger concentrations of Pacific Islanders, you do have a disaggregation or a separation of the data for Pacific Islanders, but in that data, we don't have enough on Chamorros specifically. So on the horizon, to do a more complete count, it's not only a population count, but for me, a count in higher education. If we look at the historical context of Chamorro migration, as many professors and scholars do, they look at the historical consequences of colonization. Colonization, regardless of your politics, set in motion some time ago a dispersal of people across the globe in various locations and within various empires. Within the story of the U.S. colonization, this is the historical trajectory that set Chamorros on in a migration path and dispersal. There's other historical evidence of whaling and trade being swept up as part of that, but mainly looking at the impact of colonization, it set in motion labor migration. It set in motion, just looking for opportunity. And when the opportunity came up with the more ease of travel, this further opened up, Chamorro migration. And there's a lot more work, Faye Antolin and Robert Underwood's earlier work, speaks to some of this. And the big one on the island is military recruitment and enlistment. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Chamorros per capita served the U.S. military more than any other group per capita. And so that in itself is a story. There's the stories that we all share with our families of some of our relatives simply, seeking out adventure, socioeconomic opportunity, higher education, job relocation, those kinds of everyday stories that you're all familiar with. And then with technological development, air travel, and then this day and age, the virtual communication, et cetera, the pace in which we can communicate has opened up further the floodgates of migration, out migration as well as in migration. And then perhaps more recently in terms of, Guam's infrastructure, and then this is mainly based on conversations with my family members, healthcare migration. As you reach an age where you have more acute healthcare needs on a daily basis, it's quite a pain to have to get on a 14-hour flight and put yourself up in a hotel, et cetera. I was just having a conversation with my auntie about this. And so there is an issue of healthcare infrastructure, et cetera, for very acute care for our elders, for our mananku. And so that has an implication as well. So, this is just kind of an overview of some of the things that initiate Chamorro migration and diaspora. All right, any questions? How are we doing? Kirk, did you write a question yet for my lecture, for your test? You working on it? Now, I want to go back to making the distinction between migration and diaspora, because I think they're often confused to be the same thing. They're part of the same phenomena, but they are different things. Migration is the thing that was sparked, I think, initially by colonization. Colonization channeled the patterns of migration among Chamorros, as well as other people. Diaspora is more of a response to the channeling, to the colonial channeling of those migration patterns. So diaspora is kind of, there's two definitions. One is more related to migration, but it is this latter definition that I'm referring to in terms of a people's response to being displaced historically. And it is through that response, through that active response and resilience, that Chamorros have reshaped their own identities in meaningful ways, regardless of where they're geographically located. And so most of the literature on diaspora and migration speaks to like familial, cultural, and religious diaspora. And the ways in which, for instance, Chamorros have taken things that have been imposed upon from the outside, like Catholicism, like higher education, like capitalism, like pluralism, Americanization, assimilation, and have taken those things that they didn't invent, but have made them their own, and have, in a sense, redefined themselves in those terms. And so when we look at, the authenticity, the quote-unquote authenticity of Chamorros in this day and age, it has less to do with the direct connection we have with our ancestors, with ancient Chamorros, and it has more to do with the contemporary moment, I think. At least that's my emphasis. There is another emphasis that I am less familiar with, which has to do with a more spiritual basis of a more direct connection. And so I'm not denying that. I'm just telling you what my emphasis is tonight. And then, of course, the political diaspora, the attention and the hard questions that have been asked about Guam's political status for quite some time, but especially since the 70s, which was kind of the birth of the Chamorro movement of that time, and maybe a little earlier. And so this political diaspora is something that's not only going on Guam and the Mariana Islands. These political issues are the things that bind together Chamorros in the States as well. And so it is the connections not only with Chamorros in the States and the Chamorros in the CNMI and Guam, but it's the Chamorros across the Pacific that is part of the political diaspora. And it's even broader than that. It's the tapping into other sovereignty and indigenous movements in other parts of the world, and that's where Native Pacific Studies is playing a role in marking that overlap between Pacific Islander studies and Native American studies and indigenous studies, etc., indigenous studies globally. And that is part of what some call a fourth world movement. So that's another dimension of diaspora. But what I want to talk to you more about in the latter half of this presentation is higher educational diaspora, because I'm mostly talking to students today. Those of you who are thinking of graduate school and going to the States or going to New Zealand or Australia, the decisions you have before you are not only educational, not only in terms of opportunity, but I'm sure you're asking familial questions as well. So I want to talk more about the higher educational diaspora of the Chamorros. Just as a brief overview, when I was doing this, I wasn't planning on doing a model, but I was doing this on the plane ride because it's such a long plane ride. And usually models are intended to simplify complex things.